Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Ivey. I am the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of University Partnerships. Welcome, and thank you for joining PD&R's Office of University Partnerships, the Democracy Collaborative of the University of Maryland, and the Annie E. Casey Foundation for a very informative presentation entitled Linking Anchor Institutions to Outcomes for Families, Children, and Communities, the Community Dashboard. This afternoon, the white paper that was submitted to the Annie E. Casey Foundation by the Democracy Collaborative will be presented. This paper initiates an important conversation aimed at developing some common indicators and metrics to use in measuring community engagement. At this time, I'd like to introduce Kennard Wright, the grant specialist in the Office of University Partnerships, who will introduce our esteemed speakers. And I would like to take just a minute to thank Kennard for working very hard with all of our speakers to make sure that this happened. And I can tell you that they hit a few bumps. But at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Kennard Wright.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. From the University of Maryland's Democracy Collaborative, we have Executive Director Ted Howard and Research Associate Sarah McKinley, and they will introduce the white paper. Ted Howard, the founding Executive Director at the Democracy Collaborative, directs the Collaborative's partnership with the Cleveland Foundation on the Evergreen Cooperative Business Initiative, a path-breaking strategy to create green jobs for low-income families in 6 of Cleveland's underserved neighborhoods. I'm sure you will hear more about this exciting initiative during Ted's remarks. For the past 3 decades, he has worked in the nonprofit civil society sector, including more than 15 years in international development with NGOs and agencies of the United Nations system. Most recently, he was Executive Director of the National Center for Economic and Security Alternatives, a Research and Policy Institute. He serves on the boards of Common Ground, the world's largest conflict resolution NGO, and LIFT, a national organization dedicated to engaging college students and youth combating poverty in our nation's urban areas. Sarah McKinley, Research Associate at the Democracy Collaborative, has a background in community development and has worked with a number of community groups, including the Greater Southwest Development Corporation, a Chicago-based community development corporation, and the National Alliance for Community Economic Development Associations. While earning her master's degree in urban and regional planning at Cornell University, she was author of A People's Plan for New Orleans, a bottom-up community development plan for the Ninth Ward after Hurricane Katrina. Concluding remarks will be provided by our friend and colleague, Charles Ruthizer of the Annie Casey Foundation. Charles is certainly no stranger to HUD or PD&R, having written a well-received article on anchor institutions for our online newsletter, The Edge, and having been a moderator, speaker, and collaborator on many presentations and projects. Charles is a senior associate in the Center for Community and Economic Opportunity at the Annie Casey Foundation in Baltimore, Maryland, where he manages the center's grant portfolios related to anchor institutions and knowledge development, and is part of the team that is developing the Casey Foundation's next generation investment strategy in community change. Charles is also an active member of the Urban Land Institute, Inner City Council, and the Anchor Institution Task Force. Prior to working with the Casey Foundation, Charles directed the graduate program in applied anthropology at the Georgia State University. He has taught cultural anthropology and urban studies at Johns Hopkins, Bryn Mawr, Western Michigan University, just to name a few. He is author of Imagineering Atlanta, The Politics of Place in the City of Dreams, and numerous articles and reports on urban development in the United States. The closing remarks will be delivered by our own Jean Lynn Powell, General Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Office of the Policy Development and Research Office here at HUD. No further ado, I'm going to turn the podium over to Ted.
All right. I think I'll just talk from here, if that's okay. Good. So welcome, everybody. Could we get the PowerPoint up, please? So while we're getting that ready, first I want to thank Kennard and Deputy Assistant Secretary Ivy for the invitation to be with you today. We're going to do a presentation about the findings of this white paper that will take about 45 minutes. Sarah McKinley and I will do different sections, so we'll kind of pass it back and forth. And then as Kennard said, our friend Charles Ruthizer of the Annie Casey Foundation, which provided funding for this project and ongoing support for its dissemination and adaptation, hopefully with anchor institutions around the country, will provide some concluding remarks. So let me begin very briefly with our organization, the Democracy Collaborative, so you know who we are. We are affiliated with the University of Maryland at College Park here in the Washington, D.C. area, but we don't really think of ourselves as purely an academic center. We consider ourselves engaged scholars and reflective practitioners. We're very interested in ideas, and we think ideas really matter, but we're interested in how they play out and in practice in communities, particularly for us in addressing issues such as wealth inequality, disinvestment in our core urban areas, underserved communities, and the like. So as it says on your screen there, our intent is really to promote innovations in what we call community wealth building. And anchor institutions, we believe, have a very important role to play in that. Our work is really threefold: a great deal of research, particularly in the anchor field, but in many others, employee ownership, cooperatives, community development finance, and many of the issues that are important here at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Advisory or consulting with community foundations, city governments, nonprofit organizations, anchor institutions to assist them in developing their own strategies, and then really building the community wealth field, a kind of new approach to economic development. These are examples of some of the research papers and reports and books that we've done recently in the last couple years on particularly universities and hospitals. Most of this can be downloaded from our website, which is community-wealth.org. We'll put that up again. They're free downloads for those of you that want to explore these issues more. So I know probably most of you in this room and listening well know what an anchor institution is, but let me just review particularly our definition, our perspective, and to acknowledge right up front that this idea of anchor institution is a fluid concept right now. There are a lot of different perspectives. I want to share with you ours because it impacts what we've decided to study and report on in this white paper. So an anchor institution is really very distinct, certainly in our minds, from a traditional corporation. One of the natures of an anchor institution is it's rooted in place, or what you could call sticky capital. That's why large nonprofit universities, hospitals are often considered anchors because they just stay in place. You know, here in the Washington, D.C. area, over the next 100 years, there are going to be lots of businesses that come and go in this community. We see it in cities all over the country. But you can rest assured that Georgetown University, that the University of Maryland at College Park, that GW, that American University, they are going to be here in 100 years because they are rooted and stuck in place. And you can see the other aspects of the nature of these anchor institutions. Typically, 5 of the 10 largest employers in a major metropolitan area are large nonprofit anchor institutions. Typically, they have a social mission. Eds and meds, as they're called, universities, hospitals, not only are businesses in themselves, if you will, although nonprofit, but they have social missions of research and teaching and service and providing health care and preventative health and so forth. And we think that these institutions represent an enormous potential for communities all over the country, particularly urban areas, again, because they don't get up and leave. And I'm going to discuss a little bit of that potential here in one moment. So what are anchor institutions? Pretty much everyone's agreed universities and hospitals fit that bill. There are some 4,000 or 5,000 universities, 5,000 or 6,000 hospitals around the country. Local governments, obviously. You know, the government of Cleveland, Ohio is not going to outsource itself and move to China. So you could count on that institution's going to be there for the long haul. Often museums, performing arts centers. Some people broaden the definition a bit to include sports teams. Now, I'm living in Cleveland, Ohio right now, and, you know, that's problematic because a few years ago the Browns picked up and moved to Baltimore. But nonetheless, mostly sports teams are in place. Cultural institutions and the like. The economic dimension of hospitals and universities, I think, is particularly important, and it's why in our study we focused on those 2 types of institutions. Not that the cultural institutions and the religious and so forth aren't important, but if you look at what are the economic engines of cities and regions in this anchor space, they tend to be eds and meds. And as the slide up here shows, in terms of their expenditures, hospitals and universities in the United States represent over $1 trillion, well over $1 trillion annually, which is 6% of the gross domestic product. And in terms of endowments, $700 billion, nearly $750 billion invested. And bear in mind, these institutions do not pick up and go. So it's very much in their self-interest, at least in principle, to conduct their business in a way that they have a more resilient community, a safer community, a healthier community. What this gets to, in one example, is procurement. So how do you conduct yourself? And we'll see an example here, and it's one of the metrics that we use in this dashboard. How do you conduct your business if you're a hospital that's spending $1 billion a year on goods and services? And there are a number of hospitals like that around the country. Do you simply buy wherever you can get a product? Or do you think through your purchasing strategy to say, you know, it makes a lot more sense for our community if we can be buying from local vendors, because that's going to provide more jobs. That's going to give us the opportunity for a multiplier effect as money circulates in our community. That means more people are going to have health care in our community. And you get a kind of cascading set of results from simply conducting your business in a different way. By the way, for you as an institution, this is not only good for the community. If you're a hospital and you're buying essential medical equipment, whether it's gauzes and pads or needles or whatever, and they're being transported 1,000 miles to your facility, and there's a major disruption, as we've seen, like Superstorm Sandy or major weather events or whatever it is, man-made or natural, it's better to have your suppliers closer to your facility because it's going to make your institution more resilient. So we think there's a very good argument to be made about why conducting business in a new way among anchors is not only good for the community, it's good for the institution. It truly is the classic win-win. We talk about this in the Democracy Collaborative as really an institution expressing its anchor mission. And the definition is up on your screen, and I'd like to just read it. I know you can. But it's a consciously thought out definition. To consciously and strategically apply the long-term place-based economic power of the institution in combination with its human and intellectual resources to better the welfare of the communities in which they reside and in particular low and moderate income neighborhoods. In other words, thinking through consciously in the institutions, how do we invest? Can we invest in a way that supports our community and gives us a reasonable rate of return? How do we spend our money? And harmonize the business practices with the more traditional research and service and teaching and providing of healthcare, and get it all integrated, if you will, all firing together at the same time. So finally, before turning it over to Sarah to start to report on the dashboard, why do we think it's time for an anchor institution dashboard? Why do we think measures and indicators and metrics are important? Really, there are a couple reasons. One, there's a growing recognition now among universities, hospitals, and cultural institutions that their fate is inextricably bound up with their communities, and that economic development, if you will, is part and parcel of what they do. Now, this 15 years ago was a fairly radical idea. Not a lot of institutions thought this way. Now it's becoming fairly commonplace. So you have lots of institutions starting to get engaged economically with their communities. But the question is, how do we know these initiatives are working? There's a lot of great effort going on. There are a lot of resources moving around. But are these efforts really producing the outcomes they intend to produce? And one of the nasty truths about a lot of historic anchor institution community engagement strategies is that despite the best efforts of the people doing the work, they set in motion a certain dynamic in the community that raises, because as the community gets safer and healthier and better, property values go up, rents go up, and all of a sudden the traditional population that lived in these neighborhoods in the bad times when they were tough places to live in, as they improve, the historic residents can't continue to live there because they can't afford to live there. And so you get communities blasted apart. Yes, you get a safer place, but the people you're really trying to benefit have to leave. So how do we stop that process? And one of the ways we can start to attend to this is by following very specific indicators related to the inclusion of all in this process. So our view is we need targeted outcomes, we need indicators, and we need our institutions to collect data around these so we know if we're succeeding at what we're trying to do. One caveat here, what we're going to propose to you, we do not pretend to say this is the final word on measures. The intent of this project is to generate a discussion, a conversation, a debate within our institutions about what do we need to measure. But let's agree that we've got to start to measure the outcomes of the work we're doing related to the community. So when you hear these measures, I hope you'll be thinking, well, that's not such a good measure. Why don't we measure this indicator? What about that indicator? That's a sign that this process is working, because we're thinking about indicators, not quarreling with, well, are these the right ones? Let's all get in the trenches together and figure out what we need to start to track. Finally, and then sorry, this is not an academic exercise. It is a paper with footnotes, and it kind of looks academic. The intent, however, is that we encourage a number of anchor institutions, some hospitals, some place-based campuses, universities, maybe whole university systems like a statewide system, to begin themselves to start to pilot these indicators. And so we're doing, with the good support of the Annie Casey Foundation, a great deal of dissemination. You can see the logos up here of conferences we've spoken at and meetings we've had and interviews we're doing and events like this, and we're going to keep this process going for the next year. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Sarah McKinley, and I should acknowledge that there are 3 co-authors on this paper, Sarah, myself, and Steve Dubb, who is our Director of Research at Democracy Collaborative. He couldn't be here today because he's in Denver, Colorado on another assignment for us. But Sarah, if you'd start.
Great. Thank you very much, Ted, and thank you, Kennard and everyone at the University Partnerships Office here. I'm going to talk real quickly here. I'll just go through our approach to doing the research for this report. The research began in 2012 with a grant from Annie Casey Foundation, with most of our interviews conducted in the summer of 2012, June, July, and August. And as you'll see on the screen right now, we interviewed 75 leaders from anchor institutions, national nonprofits, government agencies, and community groups. And we were looking to find people who had a perspective on best practices on anchor institution engagement in communities. And we were talking with all of these folks to find out what was an anchor mission in their perspective. Did they have one? What did it look like? What did that mean? Why were they motivated to engage in the community in the first place? Did they have institutional measures in place? Were they tracking the work that they were doing, the partnerships in the communities? And what would they ideally like to see in a set of measurements and a set of indicators to help them direct that work more efficiently? As I mentioned, we interviewed community groups. We thought that was very important in order to help provide a reality check and an on-the-ground perspective for the work of anchor institution partnerships to find out if, in fact, communities were truly benefiting from these relationships. So we wanted to talk with community groups. We partnered with the Sustainable Community Development Group, which is an organization based in Tacoma Park here, Tacoma Park, Maryland, that works nationally with community groups across the country. And they helped us to reach out to groups who have been working with anchor institutions to find out, are they benefiting from these relationships, from these partnerships? What's working? What isn't? What would they like to see be done better? And what would they like to see in a set of indicators and metrics that would benefit the work that they're doing? So it should come as no surprise that we found out from our interviews that there are a number of challenges to these partnerships, to these relationships between institutions and communities. And you can see the list here on the board in the presentation. They generally fall into three major categories, and that is relationships with the communities. So community distrust, the relationship between the ivory tower, if you will, and the community, history of bad relationships, in some cases even, experimentation in communities with certain populations. So that's a real challenge to get over that kind of a history. Of course, there are racial and cultural barriers often between the institution and the community. Another major grouping of challenges is internal institutional challenges. Is there administrative buy-in? Is the president of the university or the CEO of a hospital interested in promoting the well-being of the community and connecting that to the work of the institution? Are there incentives for your employees to engage directly in community work? And then the third large grouping of challenges is operational and implementation challenges. A lot of institutions, especially in the cases of universities, break into what we call fiefdoms in some senses, or federations. There are lots of different divisions and departments that are doing things on their own, and there's not a lot of coordination. So it's challenging to really have a systematic and holistic perspective on approaches to communities. Of course, there are also challenges for measuring outcome, for putting together a set of indicators that will show impact. Of course, you can see these on the screen. It's not always easy to get data from an institution. They're not always transparent about what they're doing, how many programs they have in place, what numbers truly are. And gathering that data takes time, it takes manpower, and it takes money. So those things aren't always readily accessible. It's difficult to isolate impact. How do you show causality? There are so many things going on in a community. How can you attribute an outcome to the work that you're doing? Isolating that isolating that impact can be a challenge. And also, how do you measure what's truly important? How do you measure a relationship? How do you measure an attitudinal change? These are things that don't usually lend themselves to the notion of metrics and measurement. And of course, this is something that takes time. It doesn't follow funding flows. It doesn't follow the academic year. You need to be able to look at these things over time and track them over time. So, of course, we're not looking for the perfect set of indicators. As Ted said, this is a conversation to get institutions thinking about the impact of their work. So there's no comprehensive set of indicators. So as President Wewell says here, we're looking to just agree on a number of indicators that can help us get to that point. When we were interviewing people, despite all these challenges that I've just been talking about, there was overall agreement that there needs to be some way of measuring that impact, a way of demonstrating and showing the work that you're doing as having either a positive or a negative impact. So as we set about putting together the set of indicators from our research and our interviews, we came up with a number of measurement principles. And of course, all that are on this screen right now should be developed in correspondence and relationship with what's important to the community, and also looking at it in a way that what we're doing is benefiting low-income communities and working to reduce poverty and poverty-related disparities in communities. So, of course, any indicator, any metric has to be realistic. It has to be something that can be measured, that can be tracked. And the idea, of course, is to set benchmarks, goals, create expectations. This is what we should be doing. This is what we aspire to do as an institution. If you can't have strict numbers, you can also look at whether there is a policy in place. Do we have a local procurement policy? Do we have a local hiring policy? And do we have goals to get there? Do we have percentages? We are going to direct 40% of our, that's ambitious, but 40% of our procurement locally. That would be nice. 2% is often where we start, but that's a good timeline and goal to set. And of course, drawing from best practices. Do we know this works? Has this worked in other places? Will it work in your community? So that's what we did as we set about to get these indicators going.
Great, thank you, Sarah. So we're going to now go through the different outcomes and indicators that we're proposing and putting on the table for discussion and dialogue in this dashboard. If you have, those of you that are here in Washington, D.C., if you have the dashboard with you, this blue publication, I believe it's the centerfold, you'll find these indicators, but I'm also going to show them to you up here on the screen. So we looked at outcomes in the areas of economic development, health, safety, and environment, community building, and education. And what we're going to do now is go through these different indicators and provide not an example for each one, but a real-life example of 4 or 5 different institutions that are moving the needle, we think, or moving the dial effectively in some of these areas. First, a couple themes that are important as we think about this. Imagine there you are in your seat and you are an institution, right? You're a large university, a large hospital, and you want to conduct your business in a way that benefits the community. One of the first questions one needs to ask is, what is my community? Now, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, working there in the Greater University Circle area with a number of colleagues, obviously, with 2 major hospital systems, University Hospitals and Cleveland Clinic, very large health systems, and Case Western Reserve University. And in that setting, the community is really the neighborhoods that surround those institutions. They're low-income neighborhoods, they have very high unemployment, there's very little business activity and jobs in those neighborhoods, and the institutions are literally surrounded by them. So for them, when they look at what is our community, while they're concerned about all of Cleveland and Northeast Ohio, they say, no, the 6 or 7 neighborhoods where 40,000 people live surrounding our institutions, that's our community. If you go down to Atlanta and you talk with Emory University there, and those of you who've been to Atlanta, the neighborhoods around Emory, they're very stable. They're very successful. They're kind of upper middle class. You're not going to find a lot of disinvestment and poverty and unemployment. So when they think of their community, they may need, if they're interested in low and moderate income families and neighborhoods and children, they may need to think more broadly to the whole city. So this question of defining what is your community is very important. Obviously, defining specific desired outcomes. Are you trying to help people get work? Are you trying to help people get living wage, family supporting jobs? Are you trying to improve the schools in your community? What are the outcomes that you're going for, and spending the time to get that clear? And different institutions are going to have different answers to that. And finally, we think in looking at indicators, we really need to be focusing on indicators related to two things. One, what is the state of the community, your community, however defined? What is its status? The unemployment, the poverty, the dysfunctionality, the benefits, the assets, and tracking that over time, looking for improvement. And the second set of indicators is looking internally, looking in the mirror at your institution, and what is the institutional level of effort that you're making. In other words, as Sarah said, you might be purchasing 2% of all of your goods and services from the lower income neighborhoods that are your community. Your institutional effort, you may want to get that up to 10% or 15% or 20%. So you're driving more money locally, creating more economic opportunity. You need to track that in terms of your institutional effort on an annual basis. So I will just share with you one example in the first economic development indicator, and I'll turn it over to Sarah for a while, and then I'll come back. We'll play a little tag on this. So first, equitable local and minority hiring. We think that's an outcome that would be a very good thing for an institution to begin to focus on. And an indicator of that could be the percentage of local minority hires in staff positions. It could be percent employed at living wage or above. Now, you might think if you're a hospital, you're paying everybody a living wage or above. That is not the truth. There's a major hospital system I'm familiar with, not in Cleveland, where they have so many employees who are full-time employees earning less than a living wage that the other staff in the hospital have started a food drive to bring in cans of food to help their colleagues who are working in the same institution. So percent employed at living wage or above. And the data there, you could track that. It's institutional data, right? It's what you're paying people. Another way to look at this is procurement dollars. How much of your money is being driven to local businesses legitimately owned locally, on the theory that if you're spending locally and the ownership is local, those owners are going to hire people locally and they're going to go out to other vendors and spend the money, and you're going to get a multiplier effect. And as an example of how this works, this is something I'm very familiar with in Cleveland. University hospitals, as I said, one of our two major health systems. They were beginning, this is from 2005 to 10, began a program called Vision 2010. Now the hospital was going to spend $1.2 billion on new construction and procurement over a 5-year period. The normal way a hospital system would do this kind of thing is you would go out and find one of the 5 or 6 big national contractor firms, and you would give them a contract and say, we've got $1 billion, and we want these 8 buildings, and we want them over here and here and here, and we want it on this timeline, and we want you to bring it in on budget. And by the way, if you could throw off a few contracts to local businesses or minority or female-owned firms, that would be great. But that's up to you. University hospitals said, no, we're not going to conduct our business that way. We're going to set a new standard. No one forced them to do this. They took this on themselves as part of their anchor mission, if you will. They made a determination that they were going to have specific carve-outs for minority and female-owned businesses. In that 5 years period, they eclipsed all of them, their targets. They said they were going to spend 80% of the $1.2 billion locally to put people to work. They achieved 92%. They hired an external monitoring firm called Minority Business Solutions to monitor them. These aren't their numbers. They're a third party's numbers looking at this whole situation. And at the height of the recession in 2007, 8, 9 in Northeast Ohio, where nothing was happening good economically, this institution drove over $1 billion into the local economy. More than 5,000 people got jobs as a result. That's a way you can begin to change your business practices. And by the way, going forward, University Hospitals is continuing that same aggressive stance. any contract that comes up at university hospitals, and they spend about $800 million a year on goods and services, any contract that they let has over $20,000 has to have one of the bids come from a local minority or locally owned firm so that they can compete with the big guys on this kind of thing.
Great. I'll go through a number of the other indicators. The next one, also in economic development, we're looking at thriving business incubation. So is there local access to business resources? A lot of universities, for example, have a tech transfer center, but is that something that people in your community are able to access and use? Often it's not. So what other ways are there for local residents to gain access to business capacity building tools and resources? A lot of institutions will have a small business incubator office that they run and support, and so you can find out if your institution is doing something like that by looking both at your institutional data, percent of businesses that you've incubated, for low-income and minority populations, like Ted was talking about in his last example. A lot of businesses had to grow in order to fill the needs of that project. So how is the institution helping that to happen? Is that available to the local community? Another important indicator is a vibrant arts vibrant arts and cultural development. This was something actually that we heard as very important from a lot of the people that we interviewed. They wanted to see an indicator measuring arts and cultural development. Of course, arts and culture not only create a very vibrant community where people want to live and work and visit, it also generates a lot of economic activity, the multiplier effects that Ted talks about. So you can look at whether your institution is supporting cultural development, art development in the community. You can do that by looking at what kinds of arts and jobs and businesses are created in your community, and the kinds of money being spent on that. A good example of this is Syracuse University's Near West Side Initiative. This started in 2007 under the leadership of Nancy Cantor, who was chancellor of the university at that time. And she set as a goal to use the power of art, technology, and innovation in keeping with neighborhood values and culture to revitalize the 9th poorest census tract in the United States. So she set out with that as a goal in mind and made that an institutional priority. It also happened that at that time, the state of New York was forgiving loans for universities. So they were able to use $13.8 million in debt forgiveness to reinvest in building the community there in Syracuse. And they did it in a number of ways. One of the ways they did it was through this Near West Side Initiative. They created a nonprofit that was formed in collaboration between businesses, nonprofits, residents, educational leaders, and so forth. That is an independent entity overseeing this project. And then they worked on creating a connective corridor between the university, the downtown business core, and the cultural, the arts district, the arts community. And they had a lot of other projects that were part of that connective corridor. They rehabbed abandoned warehouses to be live workspace for artists. They had a home ownership grant, a guaranteed mortgage program. And this was all starting before Chancellor Cantor set this as the goal, and then she pulled it all together under this one project and put the full weight of the institution behind it. This is something that we profile in one of our reports that you can get online as well, so you can look at that in more depth there. Another economic development indicator is affordable housing. This is very important. As Ted mentioned, a lot of times, a lot of the activities that institutional engagement in communities generate often raise housing costs, land values, and so forth, making it very difficult for the people who have been living there to stay living there. So building in some kind of mechanism for affordability in the work that you're doing in communities is very important to make sure that the community is not getting priced out. And one way to track that is, can your employees even live there? If your employees can't afford to live in the community where you're located, that's a pretty good sign that other people can't as well. So there are many different ways that institutions can support affordable housing in their community. They can directly invest in affordable housing. They can invest in community land trusts, which is a good way to prevent against rising land costs over time. And you can track this using census data to see how much people are spending on housing costs, and you can do so also by tracking institutional effort as well. Another good example of this is the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. The Mayo Clinic is the economic driver of that part of Minnesota, the southeast part of Minnesota, and it's the largest private employer in all of the state. And they, starting in the mid-90s, they realized that their employees could not afford to live in Rochester or the surrounding communities. They were commuting from very long distances to get to work. And they realized, oh, well, this is a problem. And so they realized that they had to do something to create affordable housing in their community. But what makes them a very special example is that they didn't want this just for their employees. They said, oh, well, clearly this is a problem for the community as a whole. So how can we build in affordability that everybody can access? And they were the principal investor. They gave $7 million to a community land trust, the First Homes Community Land Trust, working with the Rochester Area Foundation, which is a community foundation in Rochester, and empowering them to create this land trust, as well as other affordable housing units. At the end of the project, there were 875 affordable housing units. There were also rental units in that. 210 of those were in the land trust. So as you see, the land trust was one component of a multifaceted approach to affordability in Rochester.
Great, thank you, Sarah. I just want to acknowledge there's a lot of information flowing at you here. So we've got a few more indicators we want to get to, a few suggestions about how to move this agenda forward, and then Charles's comments, and then we'll take questions and understand we're doing it both in person here, but as well email questions, and I don't know if we're tweeting, but whatever, they may be coming in. So the next is really about the use of endowment dollars for investment. I mentioned at the outset that if you take the eds and meds together, they represent over $700 billion in assets that are being invested in the stock market, for instance, bonds, across all asset classes. If you look at other kinds of anchor institutions like community foundations, there's 700 of those all over the country. Again, they're rooted in their community. They're not going to get up and go. They're controlling hundreds of billions of dollars of investments as well. But very often, and the norm is, the investment portfolios that are being controlled by the financial managers or outsourced to a financial institution to invest are not aligned. Those investments are not necessarily aligned with the social purposes of the institution that has the money that is being invested. So a key indicator, we think, is how are we making our investment determinations? And can we, not all the money, but can we start to think of investing some of our portfolio locally? Put some billions of dollars into the local community to create jobs, multiplier effect, and so forth. There are precious few examples of this that we know, and we do a great deal of research, and anybody in this room or around the country or might be watching, if you have other examples, please send them in to us. These are universities that have taken a portion, usually a small portion, but a portion of their endowment, and specifically targeted the investments locally. Now, they do that because they do think it's good for the community, but they also understand it's good for the institution. So take the stellar example is the University of Cincinnati. University of Cincinnati some years ago had a $1 billion, with a B, $1 billion roughly endowment, depending on what was going on in the market, and decided when they looked at their campus and the surrounding neighborhood that if they didn't start to conduct their business in a way that would start to improve those neighborhoods, parents were going to stop sending their kids there. professors that bring in big research grants weren't going to choose that university as the one to come to. They look down the road at the long-term vision, not what can we get in the market this year, but what is our fate in the next 20, 30, 40 years if this degrading situation in the neighborhoods continues? Because recall, University of Cincinnati is not going anywhere. It's going to be there no matter what. And so under the leadership of Nancy Zimpher, at the time the president of the University of Cincinnati, who's now the chancellor of the State University of New York system, 64 campuses, under President Zimpher, the board of trustees of the university made a commitment to take 1/10 of the endowment of the institution, $100 million, and invest it locally, basically seeking a 4% return, what is called in philanthropy a kind of program-related investment return, knowing that they would earn less in the short term, but in the long term, they believed it was really in the self-interest of the institution. Today, they're up to almost $150 million. And there are some other examples like that, as you can see from the board.
And I'm just going to go through the last set of indicators, and I'm going to try and go a little quickly because I know we've got to pay attention to time here. So the next set of indicators fall under community building and education. And a lot of this is building the capacity of the community. If the institution is going to deliver on a lot of these projects, buying locally, hiring locally, you also have to help the community to be able to do that, to be able to build capacity as well. So, of course, having an effective and equitable local partnership in the community is key. So building the community's capacity to enter into that partnership. Is there, for example, a center for community partnerships to act as a front door for all that's going on at the institution so that the community can access what's going on? Is there some kind of transparency for the community? Are community members on an advisory board? Are they part of the process of communication and determining what's going forward in these economic development activities? And you, of course, can measure that in terms of institutional effort, and also in terms of surveys and getting out there and talking with the community, engaging with them as well. Are families and individuals financially able to access assets and build ownership and stewardship of those assets as they gain access to them? Is the institution providing financial education, home ownership grants, for example, individual development accounts, fostering community ownership, fostering individual asset growth? And there are lots of different programs, as I just mentioned, that they can do that, and so tracking that and the dollars invested in that to see if that's happening. Educated youth, educating the young people in the community, school partnerships, of course, that's something that's a natural fit for higher educational institutions, looking beyond just educating their students, realizing that there are future students and future workforce and citizens around them in the community, and what are they doing to help stimulate that and grow that and improve that. A good example of that, perhaps the national leader in terms of engaging with community schools, is the University of Pennsylvania in West Philadelphia. As I said, it's the national leader. As most people probably know, West Philadelphia is a low-income, underserved community, and the University of Pennsylvania, starting in the 1990s, very conscientiously engaged with schools in their community to help build the capacity at a very young age through lots of different programs, not just actually teaching in the schools, but also training principals, training school administrators, training educators so that they have skills to engage productively with students. They actually have programs in 23 schools in West Philadelphia, throughout the city, with 9 in West Philadelphia, and the best known, of course, is the Penn Alexander School, which is a school that the university established and provides $750,000 a year in funding to continue that. It is a public school in West Philadelphia there as well. And that's another one that we've profiled extensively in some of our previous reports. And the final set of indicators falls under health, safety, and environment, realizing, of course, that healthy communities mean many things. Health writ large. Of course, we know many low-income communities are at higher risks for obesity, diabetes, higher rates of infant mortality, in general, poorer health statistics in lower-income communities, especially for a hospital in a community where there are those kinds of disparities. You have to realize that there's something right outside your front door that you can do something about, and think of it more broadly. What kind of public health initiatives are you offering? What kind of health education is being done in the community? Is there access to fresh and healthy foods? Can you look at the general statistics, health statistics in your community and track change over time? Are they improving or are they getting worse? So looking at that and having an eye for that. Safe streets and campuses, this is something that is often a big driver and what a motivator and what causes institutions to engage in their communities. As Ted mentioned, if a community is unsafe, students aren't going to come to your school, professors aren't going to come, patients don't want to travel to your hospital. So it's ultimately in the self-interest of the institution to be aware of the safety of their neighborhood. And of course, it's to the benefit of the residents if things are done in the community to improve safety. Are there placemaking strategies in place that improve lighting and walkability? What are the crime rates? Are they increasing? Are they decreasing? An institution does need to be aware of those things. And finally, you never thought I'd get here, our last indicator, but by no means the least, is healthy environment. This is something that's also very important for institutions. Many institutions have a very high carbon footprint. They use a lot of water, they use a lot of electricity, they produce a lot of waste. So this is another indicator that is very much in the self-interest of both the institution and the community to improve. So you can set environmental goals, you can move towards climate neutrality, and you can track that. There are many sort of rating systems in place, the Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System, or STARS. Of course, the Green Health Index Rating, which is essentially USGBC's lead for healthcare. So that's very important, and I'll just wrap it up with one final example of that. Gunderson Lutheran in Wisconsin is a great example of really setting environmental goals as integral to their institutional efforts. This is a Wisconsin-based system. It is the largest employer in that region, as many of these institutions that we're profiling are. In 2008, they started the Envision Plan, which had a two-sided approach to reducing their environmental impact, having a positive environmental impact, while also reducing costs not only for the institution but for their patients as well. They did set a goal of being 100% renewable by 2014, which, as we all know, is right around the corner, and they're actually almost there. So they have almost reached that goal. They set a goal of 20% local food production, which they've done, and part of the reason why they've been able to do that is they were the founding member of the Fifth Season Cooperative, which connects local farmers and producers to purchasers, including themselves. So essentially their approach was to adjust the purchasing and supply chain to really grow local economic development.
Great, thank you. So fine, just to recap, as I said at the beginning, for us, this is what we call the anchor mission, where, as you can see, you get all the elements of an institution working in harmony together toward a goal of not only meeting the needs of the institution, but benefiting the community. And in our perspective, in particular, those areas that are low and moderate income. In terms of next steps, a couple things we'd suggest, because as I said, this is not an academic exercise alone, it's an attempt to bring about change. The work we're doing, and we hope that others will do, is to promote the use of common measures like these at trade associations of anchor institutions, at conferences, at meetings, and so forth. Let's talk about this. We have something on the table, let's engage. Second, we're hoping to create a cohort of institutions that say, you know, we buy the argument. We know we should begin measuring these kinds of things. We should link our business to the benefits of the community, we'll pilot test this dashboard and seek to improve it so that we can together create a project, a product as a learning community that can really shape our institutions. We also think that community groups around the country should be empowered to also interact with their anchor institutions and help track some of this data. And finally, we were bold enough, since we're at HUD, why not? We're taxpayers, we can make a suggestion to HUD. And ours was that perhaps this institution, which does so much work with anchors, might establish some kind of award for those institutions that are really involved with the full mission orientation and signal them out and call them out. So that's our presentation. As I said, you can download these publications, this dashboard, as well as our other research at this address. And I'd like to turn it over to our esteemed colleague, Charles Rutheiser, without whom none of this work would be possible, I assure you.
Thanks very much, Ted and Sarah, for a really good in-depth presentation. And I'm gonna keep my remarks brief because I really would like to get to the more dynamic, engaged, interactive part of our agenda today, and hear some comments and questions from you and those of you who are connected to us virtually. Some of you may wonder why the Annie E. Casey Foundation, which is a foundation for first and foremost about kids, has taken such a leading role or made such a dedicated long-term investment in anchors. We've been in the space for more than a decade, and that's, that explanation, I think, is important in terms of trying to get to some of the kind of concluding comments that I want to talk about. We're about improving outcomes for poor kids, and we know that we can't necessarily improve outcomes for kids unless their families are strong. And we know that kids and families, their ability to sort of really achieve better outcomes is largely shaped, dependent, or strongly influenced by the community in which we live. I mean, we've seen more and more evidence of the fact that place matters. This is not something, it's like bringing coals to Newcastle here at HUD. Of course, place matters. And we've been involved in investing in community change for almost a quarter century. About a little more than a decade ago, we began to recognize that many of the communities in which we worked, the universities and hospitals were the largest employer. They were the engine of a great deal of economic activity, but that in many cases they were behind either literal or metaphorical walls and disconnected from the communities that they were located in. They were in the community, but not of it. In fact, quite the opposite. Usually relationships were very antagonistic. And in some ways, we thought, in all honesty, that maybe anchor institutions, these anchors, might be that holy grail that philanthropies and public policy agencies are always looking for, that the much sought after low-hanging fruit. Everyone is in search for low-hanging fruit, the stuff that's right there and you just need to grab it. Well, one of the things that we have learned over the last 10 years is that anchor institutions are not low-hanging fruit in any sense of the term. They are the trees. They are really, really, really big trees with very tough bark. And enabled to sort of realizing the promise of anchor institutions is going to require a very different way of doing it. It's going to require people going up the trees. It's going to require scaffolding in the sense of private policy, public policy around it to better connect them to their environment. And it's also going to require some tinkering with some of the genetics of the operating principles, the DNA of these trees, to be able to sort of act differently. And these are very, very long-term and very, very difficult kind of endeavors. And we really should go into this recognizing the complexity and the difficulty and the long-term nature of the challenge. Sometimes I think now we think about if we've identified it, we can move very quickly. The anchor space, I mean, there are two institutions that are perhaps more slow-moving and conservative than any, and those are academic institutions and philanthropy. We move very, very, very slowly. And I think we have over the past 10 years or so, but I think we began to sort of pick up some steam and really begin to sort of move forward to a moment where we'll be able to sort of take advantage of all the work that has been done, all the research that has been done. The big question is, well, how do you actually make this happen? How do you recognize and realize the promise of anchor institutions. I had been to conference after conference after conference, and people were talking about anchors as being the next GM or Beth Steel. And it kind of drove me crazy because it was not really an accurate metaphor at all, because we're not going to be able to expect universities and hospitals to generate tens of thousands of new family supporting jobs the way in which these industrial powerhouses did. Instead, I think we really needed to think more modestly about what these institutions might realistically be able to do. And not only think more modestly, but be much more rigorous about that modesty, about being able to have some data, to have some numbers about what really the impact of all these activities are. And in many cases, we might be able to discover some unintended, very positive, as well as maybe some recognition of the fact that it's not necessarily realizing on these very ambitious kind of goals. But we really do need to have a set of metrics and then also a way of actually, gathering that data, but also recognizing that this data is not an end in itself, much as anchor institutions are not ends in themselves. They are means to an end. Collecting this data is important to understand how well institutions are doing this and what needs to be done to sort of get to where we want to go. Likewise, anchor institutions are not ends in themselves. They are means to an end, particularly here, about revitalizing communities, cities, and regions. And we can't lose sight of that fact that sometimes the occupational hazards that we do think about these as ends in themselves. I've talked to a number of my colleagues in philanthropy, and they talk about, we don't do anchors. And I go, well, but you do economic development, right? So part of it is to be able to, I think, frame this conversation in a way in which many institutions can see themselves, many foundations, many more than are currently in the space, but would not be doing justice to my colleagues in philanthropy who have been taking a leadership role in this. The Cleveland Foundation, for example, and tremendous work that they've done as a strategic intermediary and broker and change maker in Cleveland, and Skillman and Kresge and Ford in Detroit, and Hudson in Detroit, and elsewhere, the Certain Foundation in New York, that there is this core group of foundations that are really trying to unlock the promise of anchors. And I think also it's important to talk about, going beyond universities and hospitals, beyond eds and meds, to these other kinds of institutions that are deeply rooted in communities that are sort of stuck in place, and especially generate, not only hire thousands of people, but spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Although I do take Ted's point about sports teams and sports stadia as being kind of maybe not the stickiest kind of anchors. As a resident of Baltimore, well, I could say, for the folks in Cleveland, they should take it up with Indianapolis and Bob Irsay, or as the folks in Atlanta have just found out, with the Braves deciding to relocate from the city of Atlanta to suburban campus in Cobb County. It's not just competing between cities, but within cities and regions. And it becomes very, very problematic when these entities move. But quite realistically, sports teams are not, as important as they are to a city's identity and our sense of self sometimes, they're not institutions with a social mission in the way that, say, universities and hospitals are more readily configurable in the service of these kinds of social ends. So as a final word, I just want to leave you with this, is that, and it's important for us to recognize this. I mean, Claire Miller of the F.P. Heron Foundation a while ago wrote a piece called "The World Has Changed and So Must We." Well, the world continues to change, in some cases far more rapidly than we are aware of, and we continue to. We need to be on the lookout for ways that can help us understand that nature of change and figure out the best ways of adapting to it. And the most important thing is that adapting to change is not going to be attained through business as usual, which means that a whole variety of actors and institutions, foundations, universities, hospitals, city government, the federal government, are going to have to change the way in which they do business, to be able to work together with one another, to be able to achieve these very ambitious and very critical issues. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much, Charles. So with that, Kennard, will you moderate? Thank you very much for your attention, everyone.
Thank the panel for not only a stimulating discussion, but a timely discussion, because we are actually doing something that normally does not happen at public events. We're on time. We're going to open up the floor to questions and answers, and as we said earlier, we also have folks who are watching from their computers at home in the areas who may want to send in some questions to us, and we can also get those addressed as well. We've left lots of time for questions and answers, so let's take advantage of it. Does anybody have any questions from the audience? Come up to the mic.
So, very stimulating session. Thank you very much. Michael McDonald. I'm from Global Resilience Initiatives. We're doing somewhat similar work in measuring community resilience, and especially in the coastal zones. So there may be 25 million lives that are affected through climate change, and the hospitals and universities are often embedded in these coastal zones as well. So for example, in the Rockaways, one hospital was inoperable because of the flooding, and another one was so overwhelmed and was within a community that did not have very much resources. So they are actually probably going under as well. So one of the concerns that I had was the kind of trickle-down nature of the economy from these anchor institutions, and the possibility that there's another way to approach it using dashboards to measure the mission-critical functions of a community that may need to engage sort of a shift in political economy from these very hierarchical economic systems into something that's a little more equitably emerging from the community. And I'm wondering if you're considering that within the matrix. Is there actually a transformative process that goes from the anchor institutions to something that's more broadly distributed as a new form of economic equality and vibrance within the community? Thank you.
You want to take a cut at that? Yeah, so so point well taken. You know, what sort of kicked this off for us is a commitment to equitable and inclusive development. And I think if I understand your point, I think you're quite right that a lot of these efforts really are very top-down. One of the reasons that we not only did our interviews with 60 leaders of these institutions, but 15 organizations that had been in grassroots groups that had been engaged with anchor institutions, is try to understand from that perspective what works or doesn't work. You know, I'm not sure, I don't know if I have an answer for you, but the hope here is that this isn't a sort of paternalistic and benevolent set of actions on the part of the institutions, but that there is a really authentic engagement with community and the institutions to come to, you know, a new perspective, I guess, on what matters to the community and how these institutions can listen to that wisdom and receive the desires of the community and conduct themselves in a way that is consistent with that. So I don't know if that's responsive, but I think the point's well taken. This shouldn't be about the institutions deciding we're going to give this gift to the community. It should be about we're all in this community together, and how do we all need to interact to start to address some of these burning issues we face, like the growing wealth inequality and disparities in our community.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very important potential tool for accountability to be able to require anchors to be able to sort of make that information publicly available so that communities do have, I think, a good fact base on which to engage with various institutions. I mean, the notion about resilience, I think, is fascinating. I've been really very interested to see this concept emerge, and I think it's just as important to recognize that it's about building the resilience of communities to man-made and economic disasters as well as natural ones. And it's about building the strong social capital of communities as well. It's very, very important. The challenge, though, is getting universities or hospitals or others to go into a sort of let's say, radical transformative agenda is perhaps pushing most of them a bit faster and further than they would be comfortable to go. But that does not necessarily mitigate the critical import of the issues that you raise.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Have another question? Come up to the mic.
More a remark than a question that might be an avenue to answering the prior gentleman's question. What you haven't talked about, Ted, is the companion work that goes along with the anchor dashboard piece that you're doing and the build out that you're doing, exemplified in Cleveland with regard to the worker cooperatives. Mm-hmm. And that mechanism being a means to ensure that folks that are working inside these cooperatives are earning decent wages, do have opportunities for elevation through a management system so that there is not only wages, there is ownership. So I wanted you to touch a little bit in response to his question on that particular work, which is really what undergirds the work you're doing of the dashboard.
Yeah. Well, what she's referring to is this effort that's underway in Cleveland that has really been catalyzed by the Cleveland Foundation, the oldest community foundation in the country. Next year it'll be 100 years old. And it's an effort to work with the large place-based anchors and encourage them to begin purchasing locally. But one of the things we realized is if you're truly going to purchase locally from these neighborhoods, one of the limitations is there aren't a lot of businesses in those neighborhoods that are capable of winning a contract and providing the goods and services for a large hospital, for instance, which there may be a dry cleaner in the neighborhood, but what a hospital needs is a business that can do 10, 20 million pounds of laundry every year. So the evergreen strategy that you're referring to is really to build up a network of businesses that provide living wage jobs that are owned in part by the people working within them, so they have an employee ownership aspect, they're green businesses and so forth. But I should say with the dashboard, while at the Democracy Collaborative, we think those kinds of businesses and structures that are more broadly owned and community rooted and are cooperative in nature, we very, very much favor those. So if you go to our website, you'll find literally hundreds, thousands of models and best practices and so forth. The dashboard is about something broader than that. I'd say it's not so much, are you doing business with a cooperative in your anchor institution, but are you doing business locally? And are you doing business with businesses that may be family owned, may be owned in different structures, may be co-ops, it doesn't matter, but that have really family supporting values to them, that are really paying a living wage, that do have career advancement for their employees and so forth, that they're not dead-end jobs. And so that's what this is about. And while we, Sarah and I particularly, personally favor what we call these sort of community wealth building types of companies like cooperatives and employee-owned firms, we just think it would be marvelous if anchor institutions would start to, if they want to work with those kinds, great. But if they want to work with other local businesses and minority and female-owned businesses and they're legitimately owned, that's great too. That's the conversation we're trying to get in place. But I take your point, and thank you for allowing me to give a little shout out to Evergreen.
Ellis?
Good afternoon. My name is Ellis Brown. I'm at Morgan State University right up the road in Baltimore. A couple of questions. One, in your studies, did you talk with any of the HBCUs and what they have done historically over the past half century? And two, one of the things that you'd pointed out was that there are issues and challenges in terms of the relationships between communities and their institutions and the anchor institutions. I'm not sure I was able to pick out if there's any measures or any indicators that you had up there for trying to measure whether that dial is being moved or if that needle's being moved in terms of improving community and university relationships. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, do you know if we, as part of our research agenda, and we did a big report on universities called The Road Half Traveled, and their profiles were done of HBCUs, but do you know if we interviewed someone?
For this dashboard report, unfortunately, no, we do not have anyone representing HBCU. For the Road Half Traveled, we did speak with Lemoyne Owens, and they are one of the profiles that we highlight in that publication, and they're doing some interesting work. We actually recently spoke with a woman from North Carolina Central, North Carolina Central, who is interested in seeing these indicators used there, and then she personally, she's an academic, is interested in studying HBCU's engagement in communities and with communities. So there's certainly a lot of work to be done there and a lot of potential. We haven't really delved into that quite yet, but I do think there is interest, and I do think that that's something that we'll hopefully see more of as this gains notoriety as well. So.
Charles, do you want to say anything on this? I know you've done a lot of work in Atlanta with the
Atlanta University Center.
Yeah, you've seen.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure, whether there are a specific set of indicators that would distinguish HBCUs from other institutions. In many cases, I think the structural challenges between big universities and the surrounding community, town gown, dealing with the impact of students, traffic, and crime are more similar than perhaps different. But I think figuring out what also the measure would be to sort of capture the state of relationships between the university and the surrounding community would be an important adjunct to this.
Hi there, my name is Melissa Ehrenreich. I'm an independent consultant and just generally curious. It was a fantastic presentation. I have a background in evaluation, so that was intriguing for me. I have two questions. One, because you are the Democracy Collaborative, I was struck that voting and percent increase in voting or participation in civic government was not one of your measures, and I was curious why, because I think that is perhaps a good metric to really show that communities become more invested in a long-term growth of their and health of their communities. And then two, as a fellow metric lover, and watching you go through all of the metrics, I was just curious, one of the things that you mentioned that really struck me that I have personally watched, particularly with higher education, is the notion that that you can gentrify an area to the point where you can no longer create an opportunity in any community, university, or hospitals where the people you are trying to help can no longer afford to live there. And I'm just curious, is which of these metrics, as you went through, would you prioritize as most important to really tackle that particular, creating the opportunity to really help give people the opportunity to hold and stay within their communities, and not outprice their communities for folks that live in them. Thank you.
Thank you. The question of voting and voting percentages and all that's the second time in the last 10 days it's come up. So I think this process is working, because we were meeting in Albany with the State University of New York system, and that question came up as well. Shouldn't this be an indicator, as well as a number of others? So why it's not on the list, I don't know, but it's come up consistently enough. Did you want to say something, John?
This reflects the collective wisdom of the people that you interviewed, and is an artifact of that. So I think it's a question of, well, why aren't people thinking about that?
Yeah.
And let me just interject. We did sort of allude to it in one of our indicators, which was the stable and effective local partnerships. And one of that is sort of looking at the capacity of the community to effectively engage in a partnership. And part of that is sort of looking at civic engagement rates and so forth. So voting would be something embedded in that. We didn't explicitly lay it out. And I know the American Democracy Project is working on a civic health index rating, and that is something that we recommend that be considered at looking at this. Of course, clearly it needs to be more explicitly addressed as well. But we attempted to get to that a little bit, but maybe not as much as we should.
And the this gentrification issue is it is just such a brutal issue. I heard once Judith Rodin, who was the president of the University of Pennsylvania when the West Philadelphia Initiative started. She's now the president of the Rockefeller Foundation. And she was asked, looking back 15 years or however many years it was, and the good work you did in West Philadelphia, and they did. I mean, local purchasing went from $2 million a year in West Philadelphia to it's close to $100 million now. I mean, extraordinary things happen. She was asked, is there one thing you would do differently if you could go back and do it all over? And her response, I thought, was pretty interesting. She said, we would have planned for success. We never realized that we could take this problem on and create so much energy and momentum, and we'd actually succeed in this fast a timeline. And as a result, we didn't plan for what would be the impact on the people living in the community, because it never was in our mind that we would price people out of the market. So in Cleveland, one of the mantras we've had in this Greater University Circle Initiative and Evergreen is we need to plan that we're actually going to succeed and have the success be that we're going to end up with a diverse, resilient, healthy, vibrant community of all races, income levels, classes, et cetera. There's actually, I think a really important thing is just to be thinking about this at the get-go. The indicators that most speak to that, I think, are the ones around affordable housing, that actually investing in affordable housing, using mechanisms like Sarah suggested that the Mayo Clinic did of a land trust, where you have not just a desire to have affordable housing and therefore more diversity, but you have an institutional mechanism that can promote that and indeed guarantee it. So there are structures like that that need to be put in place. But I'd say the affordable housing and also the local hiring. As you're hiring, are people coming from not just the zip codes, but the census tracts, in the neighborhoods, and are they staying there over time? Because that shows, you're hiring locally and it's working financially for them and they can afford to stay in the community. But it's a very nasty problem, as HUD's well recognizes, because we've seen it all over the country, including extraordinarily in Washington, D.C. I first came to school here in 1968. There are neighborhoods I cannot believe that 10 years ago compared to what they are now.
Another question?
My name is Tori Hollingsworth. I'm with the National Community Reinvestment Coalition.
Yay. We love your organization.
Great. And I have a question that sort of goes back to the first one about community strategies for bringing about this sort of change, especially in universities. And at universities as well, there's the other constituency of students that can sort of drive their institutions to make different investments in the neighborhood or new partnerships. And I'm curious, as you were going through the interview process, to what degree you saw things being driven by either outside groups or by students. And so to what degree things may have been reactionary by these institutions, and to what degree they were driven by this sort of strategic planning process and wanting to take on this issue.
Yeah, well, let me take a run at it, and then I'm sure Sarah and Charles will as well. In terms of the motivations, and I don't mean this as a cop-out, but it is really all over the map, right? There's a good case to be made that the reason the University of Pennsylvania first got into the West Philadelphia Initiative is because they had some of their people killed on campus by local residents. And very frankly, when that's the front page story in the New York Times and you're an Ivy League college, you wonder if parents are going to stop sending their kids there and they're going to go somewhere else. So there's that kind of motivation. There are places like in Los Angeles with I think the University of Southern California, where there were very large expansion plans underway by the campus, and the community really rose up. And we're seeing somewhat the same situation in Harlem and Columbia. So you can get a real friction going as the community feels all it represents to you is the opportunity for more parking lots and big buildings, and you're going to drive us out. So there's sometimes that. We did a report. You were a co-author, weren't you? Yes. We published so many reports, I have no idea who's authoring what anymore. But we did a report with the Responsible Endowments Coalition, which is a student-based organization on campuses around the country, on this, and they're pushing internally to have better investment policies. We're working with a group called the Roosevelt Institute and have run webinars. Sarah, you just spoke at one of their conferences, and they're very interested in taking the dashboard over the coming year and having it be, as I understand, sort of one of their flagship activities too. So I think you see a lot of motivations. You know, in Cleveland, the motivation was different. It wasn't that the community pressed. It wasn't that students pressed or any outsiders. There you had an older industrial city that's been, like Detroit and a number of other cities, leaking population. From 2000 to 2010, Cleveland lost 17% of its population. And the anchor institutions looked and said, we're here for the long haul. If we want clients, if we want workforce, we have to engage ourselves differently. So there it was really looking at the long-term future of their business model and realizing we cannot keep doing it the way we're doing it, because even if the quality of our teaching is excellent and the quality of our healthcare is excellent, if this community keeps going the direction it's in, our businesses aren't going to be viable. And then sometimes it's frankly just enlightened leadership. You know, I'm old enough that a lot of the people in the late 60s I used to run around with, they're like deans and presidents of colleges, and they still have some of those old values. So I think it's a real, across the board, there are a lot of motivations.
And let me just add real quickly, Ted mentioned we've been doing some work with the Responsible Endowments Coalition. We do have a report that we co-authored with them to sort of engage students to work directly with their institutions, to pressure them to invest in community activities. And really one of the key points there is that there are a lot of divestment activities from student groups on campuses. And so we are trying to push them to look at, well, you're divesting from fossil fuels, you're divesting from X, but what are you reinvesting in and how are you doing that? So I think the key question there is looking beyond sort of divestment into reinvestment and what that looks like and how you can do that conscientiously. So working with student groups to push for that as well. And this report we put out, it really advises to divest in community development finance institutions, CDFIs, so that...
Invest.
I'm sorry, did I say divest?
Yes.
Yeah. Invest. Invest in CDFIs. So that you're giving the community really the control over those investments. And then finally, Ted mentioned the Roosevelt Institute and using the dashboard, and that just, I think, is another way of highlighting how we really want this to be an open conversation, because the Roosevelt Institute is actually looking at using the dashboard as almost a ranking system, as sort of a lead system to rank their institutions on how they are delivering in this community engagement way. And so, you know, we really want people to look at this dashboard as open and flexible to really begin a conversation of measuring and assessing impact at the community level.
Well, I just wanted to kind of pick back up on Ellis's point in regards to the minority institutions, not only historically black, but also Hispanic serving institutions, for which my office has worked diligently with to build up lots of capacity for partnerships. And we would love to have, and there are some differences, particularly economies of scale, in regards to these institutions. They're smaller institutions, and they're oftentimes surrounded by abject poverty in those communities. So I think that there are some differences, and I think that including them in this study and in this measurement would probably provide us with some good perspective on how we can actually work on the lowest income areas in our country. So I would challenge you guys to be kind of inclusive of those institutions for which we have worked with for some time. Does anybody have any other questions?
My name's Joe Bruss with the Office of Brownfields and Land Revitalization at the EPA, and I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around, is it really the anchor institution's responsibility to try to adopt these equitable development procurement policies and first source hiring, or is it really local government responsibility? And what, I mean, the ideas, I feel like we've heard about all these great ideas for the past few years, but who are the organizations that are providing communities technical assistance to develop a project labor agreement or a first source hiring ordinance, or to get local governments to adopt mixed income housing zoning policies? I mean, these are not easy things to, you know, just to pull out of thin air. I mean, it takes time and, you know, government buy-in. So that was kind of my question.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a question, but it's a good point. I do think there's an important role for the public sector to play in this, and the public sector can be both encouraging these local institutions, which often, parenthetically, because they're nonprofit, are not contributing to the local tax base, and so there's an opportunity, I think, to dialogue powerfully with these institutions to get them to step up in other ways. But again, you know, a lot of my, Joe, as you know, in recent years, a lot of my experience has been on the ground in Cleveland. And there you have, I think what you had is a very interesting dynamic in this university hospitals example, where the university came forward and worked very closely with Mayor Jackson to take city guidelines around projects that the city put money in, called the Fannie Lewis laws about local hiring and so forth, and then integrate them into university hospitals processes. So they took a city, you know, set of regulations that they didn't need to follow because there was no public money going in the project, and voluntarily integrated them into theirs, then expanded them with a project labor agreement that wasn't just around work stoppages, as so many PLAs are, but had embedded in it equity and diversity goals, which had to be negotiated with the unions. And then that was implemented by UH. And then the city built upon that and then created a community benefits agreement that most of the major institutions in the city have signed on to. So it's a really interesting back and forth to build what Mayor Jackson calls a new normal in the city of Cleveland. If you're going to do business in Cleveland, this is now what's expected of you in terms of local hiring, minority-owned firms, women-owned firms, use of union labor or prevailing wage labor. So there is a very interesting back and forth, and I think that is going to be powerful in other cities.
Well, I think all these institutions are responsible in some measure for that, rather than saying, well, you know, it's someone else's externality. I mean, our mission has us here. This is outside of our mission and what we're able to do, so therefore we're not going to do that. That's part of the attitude and behavior change that really needs to happen, is that these business as usual is not going to be able to just transpire, as well as for corporations, as well as for, and I think you raised a good point about who's funding the building of infrastructure capacity among communities, among foundations, to ensure that the resources are there to be able to staff and empower these entities.
My name is Ellen Taylor. I'm an engineer working with actually a mayoral campaign here in DC, Angie Shalal, who's very interested in community development. Can you tell me a little bit more about how land trusts have been effectively operating in some of the communities you're working with?
How much time do we have? So, for those who don't know, so land trust is a mechanism by which, to say it really simply, land is owned by a local nonprofit corporation that has a social mission to keep that land perpetually, in perpetuity, affordable. If you buy a house, you're buying the physical structure, but not the land underneath it. And you buy it with a kind of covenant or agreement that you'll live in the house and you know, at the end of the period when you sell it, you might make a 5% profit or something, but not 100% profit or 200% profit. And the idea is that it's a way that the people, if you take a city, you know, who makes a city work? Well, they're policemen and women, they're fire people, they're sanitation workers, they're teachers, they're, you know, all these kinds of folks. But if you look at a city like Manhattan now, pretty much, or a city like San Francisco, or a lot of places in California, those kind of people can't live in the city anymore because they can't afford it. So it's a way to create an opportunity for those sorts of folks to continue to own a house. And they're very interesting, you know, structures on our website, community-wealth.org. There's a whole lot of this going on. One of the things that's very interesting, if we were meeting 30 years ago, you couldn't have asked the question you asked because there were no things called a community land trust, or there were just some models that began actually in the Deep South with farmers down there. But that concept hadn't really developed. This is a new institutional structure within the community development field. Today, there are over 200 of them. You know, one of the very interesting ones in Irvine, California, the Irvine Foundation and the city partnered to create a land trust that one day they hope is going to have something like 10,000 units in it of permanently affordable housing. And this contrasts with how, you know, we've done development, say, here in the Washington, D.C. area in Montgomery County, where, again, I'm old enough and lived here long enough ago that I remember over 30 years ago when there was new housing being developed, and the county government worked with the developers to create affordability in that new housing so they could have a mixed income situation. But they put a 30-year sunset clause on it, that at the end of those 30 years, that housing wouldn't need to continue to be affordable. And back then, no one, you know how we are in America. I mean, 30 years out, it's so far away, you can never imagine that day would really come. But it has. And now Montgomery County, which had some of the best early laws around housing affordability and new developments, now they're under tremendous pressure as people are now being forced further out. The land trust actually is a way to get affordability for the very long haul.
But then the challenges of capping asset appreciation and wealth building for the families who move in is this constant dynamic and tension within the field as well.
Yeah.
And I also wonder about most of those 200 are probably in stronger or hotter market, whatever the term of reference is. And it becomes, I think, more challenging to use in a legacy city that does not necessarily have that much in the way of a vibrant housing market. I mean, one of the issues that gets raised as well when we think about long-term affordability, a lot of the focus is on what it takes to get someone into a house and to buy a house, and not so much about the long-term, say, you know, the market improves and property taxes go up, and the ability of creating programs that cap property tax appreciation based on income. Many cities and states around the country have that, but I've been looking for research that actually talks about how effective have these been, and I can't find any. But this is as critical an issue in long-term affordability as some of the more novel ones as well, thinking about the property taxes, insurance, and so forth, all the other additional carrying costs that could very well push housing into unaffordability.
If there are any researchers out there, I think that was an invitation for a proposal for research from the Casey Foundation.
Possibly, yes.
Any other questions? Well, before we conclude, I just wanted to recognize the fact that we have some folks who have come to join us physically who came from a pretty good distance. I think we have some folks from Raleigh, North Carolina, am I correct? All right. Are there any other people who came from a long distance? I know Ellis came from Baltimore, but he usually kind of tools around here anyway. At any rate, though, we want to have our closing remarks by our Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy Development and Research, Jean Lynn Powell.
Thank you very much, Kennard. Let's take this opportunity to thank all of our speakers today for a wonderful discussion. I think the dashboard and the set of indicators really moves the needle on our research and policy and understanding of the role of anchor institutions, and really provides us with guideposts in terms of measuring the impacts of anchor institutions. Really also shows us how multifaceted the role of anchor institutions play in the communities. We also heard a lot about the best practices that are being implemented out there, and that really makes the research accessible. And also, we heard about how critical leadership is in terms of the university presidents and board of trustees, but of course we also heard about a variety of motivators that spurred an institution to action. But with all of this, I think there's so much that we can continue learning, and here in the Office of Policy Development and Research, and under the leadership of Sharon Ivey and the University Partnerships, we're excited to take this conversation to the next level, and we're really excited to work with all of you and continue to work with Ted, Sarah, and Charles in terms of how can we build on this conversation, how can we continue to shape our research agenda, and provide more of these convenings so we can continue to better understand all that's going out in the communities. How do we capture the impacts of these anchor institutions? So I thank all of you for joining us today, and please continue to keep a lookout on huduser.org for our future events. Thank you very much.
Thank you.